Hey, my name is Michelle.morris. I'm a lead equipper in the Center for Vitality for the Arkansas United Methodist Church, which everybody always asks what that is, and I'm going to let you self-define as to what it means to be the lead equipper. I'm here for the Happy Hippie Jesus Show with Jeremy and Bill.
Oh my gosh, a guest got the intro right.
Yes, not only that, but got the name of the show right, too.
I like Dippy. I mean, I really think we should add that back to the show title.
It's just too long, man.
Well, you are Dippy, though, so it kind of fits. Oh, Michelle, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks.
Mainly because you have a PhD in New Testament and Bill's Christology is messed up. So I'm hoping like you're going to be the one to talk some sense into him about Jesus being a first century Jewish guy and not a hippie.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, you could use the reverse logic and say that the sandals that everybody wears, they call Jesus sandals, right? Hippies wear Jesus sandals. So it seems like Jesus in some ways is the original hippie.
That's what I was going to say. He's like the first century version of the hippie, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, long hair, sandals, it's all good.
Peace, love.
Right.
And a radical way of life. So
radical way of life, right.
I mean, the next thing I know, you're going to be talking about how Jesus threw a cool party or something.
Oh, totally did. At the wedding at Cana. I mean, my gosh, brought the good wine out last, right?
Yeah, I just got back from there, and I mean, those water jars were huge.
So huge.
Yeah,
so big.
Yeah, that was like lots of good wine.
Right. Did you try any of the wine at Cana?
I tried it last time I was there, and, it's
sicklingly sweet?
Yes, I'm not a dessert wine person because, know, when I drink beer, I'm more of an IPA person, so I don't like sweet to begin with.
Yeah.
But the coffee there is fantabulous.
See, I'm a no caffeine girl, so no coffee for me.
Man.
I know people think that that's the real miracle of my ministry, that I do it without caffeine.
I think that's the real miracle of anyone's life in the 21st century if you do it without caffeine.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Michelle, tell us a story that explains a little bit about how you see Jesus. It can be from the Bible, it can be fictional, it can be something that happened in your own life.
Oh, make it fictional. Make it fictional.
It can begin with once there was a hippie named Bill.
I do have some fictional stories, but no, I want to go to my go-to story, which is my favorite story about Jesus, and that's the woman at the well in John 4. And I love that passage for so many reasons. I've read it from the perspective of Jesus. I've read it from the perspective of the woman, from the perspective of the disciples, and from the perspective of the water. For me, it's one of the richest places, but what it tells me about Jesus is, first, it tells me something about what we say about Jesus, which is we make assumptions about how Jesus judges us, because people all of the time will tell you that Jesus points out that woman had multiple husbands and is now living with a man that's not her husband. And then they go on to explain how he was judging her for that. But the text doesn't actually say that. He just announces her reality. And then when she doesn't go into that space, but instead turns it to a theological conversation, he just goes into the theological conversation with her. He treats her as an equal when it comes to conversing about God. And as a result of that, which I think really empowers her in a space where she was probably not empowered, she then is set free to go share the gospel with other people. And that's what I think Jesus does for us. Meets us where we are and sets us free.
I'm going to ask you to take a moment and go back. You said you've read it from a lot of different perspectives. Why don't you talk our listeners through like how you can read the Bible, the same story, and try to do it from different perspectives and how that unlocks the text for you?
Sure. So part of it is just putting yourself in the feet of that particular perspective. And for me, just to use that story as an example, like I said, I try to, when I read it from Jesus' perspective, I pay attention to what is Jesus actually doing and saying in that space, and not what am I filling in that Jesus is doing and saying. For the actual perspective of the woman, that particular one came alive for me. We did a performance of the Last Supper that this was when I was in West Memphis, and we said it as if it were taking place in a bar and grill on Beale Street. And the woman was one of the characters. We were using her in sort of a flashback way. So every year I had to pick a song that led into her story and then that finished her story. And so actually reading from that perspective for me is done through music. So Try by Colby Kaye is one of the songs that I've used around it. Demons by Imagine Dragons has been used around it. And just to understand what struggles we come to Jesus with. And then, like I said, how Jesus sets us free from those struggles. The disciples, I read, they sort of are, for once, not dumb in a story. And they come up and you sort of get into their inner dialogue of they wondered why he was conversing with this woman, but they don't say anything. And that actually came alive for me in the Holy Land, which I realized that in many ways, Jesus in that story plays the role of both a Jewish man and a prophet and the Messiah, which is how Judaism and Islam and Christianity view Jesus. They're all present in that story. And to be in the Holy Land and in that place, I realized that my role in that moment was to be the disciples, which was to have a lot of questions in my head, but to shut up and just let all of these perspectives live around me and let me see them. And then to preach it from the water was inspired by a fireman in one of my congregations who asked, would I look at that story from that perspective? So I would say if I wanted to boil everything down, it would be that who you are with and where you are in your life when you read the Bible will change how you understand it. And so be open to that. Be open to the fact that when you come to the Bible, it ought to be a new book every time.
When you were talking about this, you were also talking about not bringing your assumptions to the text as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've pointed out several times to people when we read this text is, now going from context the way Jesus is saying it, this probably isn't true, but we don't know. It could have been her brother she was living with.
True.
And so we end up with this judgment that comes from us straight into this story.
Right.
And so my question for you is, how do you personally filter out? I know how I do it, and it's not effective. But seriously, it's not effective for any of us because we're always going to bring ourselves to it. But,
right.
But what techniques do you use?
Sometimes I would say don't filter out, because some of it is, I think we are absolutely supposed to bring who we are and where we are into the space. So let that sort of hang out in all its glory. But I also do believe that it is important to challenge our assumptions. And so how I do that is give myself ample time not to come at the text in a rush, because when you come at it in a rush, it's hard to see that space, and to read it with other people as much as you can, because other people will help you check your assumptions. And like I said, the moment that you're in, for instance, I was getting ready to preach on the Tower of Babel, which I just set up a sermon series, and I was preaching on the Tower of Babel. And I got up that morning and realized I was preaching on the Tower of Babel on September 11th. Right? Not the best timing.
Ouch.
And now it was like 10 years after the actual date, but still, I had to really quickly take a look at that passage from the perspective of September 11th. And that's when I discovered that when you read that passage, God doesn't actually smash the tower. I'd always thought God smashed the tower, but God scatters the people. And so I was able to, in that moment, say that God does not bring destruction upon our world, but does want us to spread out and be diverse. And thank goodness I looked at that.
That's another example right there of how we bring our own stuff into the story.
Right.
Is that, I think probably 90% of us think God smashes the tower.
Right.
And really the problem isn't even with the tower in the whole story.
Right. Exactly.
The problem is that they won't go do what God commanded them to do in the first place,
right.
which was to go out to all the corners of the earth.
Yes.
Hang on. I've read a lot of the Bible, and never or rarely do I find anyone that thinks God means those commands. Like, they're always like, oh yeah, God said to do this. Let's build an altar. A golden calf, or oh yeah, God said to go tell everyone about him, but let's go fishing instead because Jesus died.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And it's, and sometimes when you make those little discoveries, it's then fun to just mess with people a little bit. Like my two favorite ones are to always, when people talk about the apple that Adam and Eve ate. And I'm like, go back to that story. What fruit was it exactly? And it's just that we've seen visual portrayals of an apple so long, we assume it's an apple. It's in our vocabulary. The other one I love to do is, I've had arguments with people on this, where we've had to actually open the Bible, and I've showed them when they tell me that Paul fell off his horse whenever he's on the Damascus Road. And I'm like, he was not on a horse. And they're like, yes, he was. Absolutely he was. He falls off his horse. I'm like, go back and read it. There's no mention of a horse at all. But there's famous painting from the Renaissance that shows him falling off his horse. And people are just convinced that that's the case. We do that. And I actually think that God intends us to fill those gaps in. I think that the Bible is written in a way that gives us sparse detail so that we bring who we are and where we are into that space. All I want us to do is be aware that that's what we're doing.
And you've, I guess, recently had an experience that's made you more aware of other things that are happening.
Yes.
Yeah, you just came back from a conference that's changed how you think about church a little bit.
It has. So I went to an e-learning conference because the conference, one of the things that I'm working on for the conference is that we're about to launch an online learning management system. It's called Course, which comes from Congregation Resourcing System, which is...
Is this a Happy Hippie Jesus Show exclusive? Are we like the first?
You're the first big public announcement of it.
I don't know if we would call us big public. We might be considered tiny public because, it's my family and Jeremy's dad. Listen,
well then, hello, Bill's family and Jeremy's dad. You're a cutting edge.
Listener. I got a text from someone in the Texas conference that I went to seminary from the other day. He's like, I listened to your podcast the other day and it was kind of good.
I like that. I like that description. It's kind of good. I think I'll put that in the show notes. It's kind of good.
It's kind of good.
It's kind of good.
Yeah, there you go. So, yes. So you're learning, this is ahead of the game. We're going to roll it out on a big scale at annual conference. We have a couple of little test runs before then. But because of that, I went to this conference. And what was different about this conference for me, I've been to a lot of conferences. They have all been, for the most part, church or academic conferences. This was overtly a corporate conference, which I chose because corporate seems to be leading the edge in technology. So I go, and I am literally, as far as I could tell, the only person from the church world there. Now, other church entities have online systems. They could be there, but I didn't see anybody else there of any denomination. So I was there with primarily a few university folks, a ton of corporate folks, including some people from Google, some people from Amazon, big major corporations. And then a fair number of government entities, including the military, were present there. And this was the mind-altering thing that happened to me there. I'm sitting in each of these sessions that I go to, and people are sharing their challenges, and they keep talking about this is what we have to do for compliance, and this is what we have to do because of the law mandates it. And this is what we can't talk about right now because we have classified clearance, and these are the things that we're struggling with. And when I went to the session on accessibility, because I want to make this as accessible a system as possible, where if you have trouble seeing or if you can't hear, this is still open to you. Everybody's sort of going around a room and talking about their challenges that they face. And one person saying, yeah, I'll lose my job if my course isn't accessible. One person saying, I will be investigated by the FBI if we don't make these things accessible. So we're sitting there, and they come to me, and I said, yeah, I'm actually part of the one entity left in the world that can legally discriminate. So we can. And I said, so I'm here because I know accessibility is the vision we should have, not because it's the thing that we have to do. And I realized in that moment what sort of crystallized for me was that the church is the most agile institution in the United States. And I have not thought of the church that way ever. But we're not shackled by regulations. We're not shackled by laws in the same way. The only limits that we have, and we have some limits, but they're self-imposed. Right? Otherwise, we have this incredible freedom to do things differently that corporations can't do, the government can't do, because they are so bound in by their requirements. And so I started thinking about, and then the next piece that happened from that was the last keynote speaker was talking about cultivating design thinking. And as she mapped out the process of design thinking, which is to start with a creative idea and then to test that idea, and it will fail a little bit there, but what you go into that space and you make changes and adjustments. And then you also bring in conversation partners into that space to talk through things and to brainstorm and to make things better so that you finally get to the whole idea that you'll be able to actually implement. As I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, that's the Trinity. So if you think in terms of creator, redeemer, counselor, creator is obviously the creative, unbound, new idea. Then you test that idea and it will fail and will have some struggles, and that's what you need redemption for, right? You adjust that idea somewhat. And then you bring in the counselor, which is the ones that would be the additional voice that would guide you and provide input. And so I'm sitting there going, this design thinking that they're trying to cultivate in the corporate world is in our theology. And what if every individual church was a community laboratory that could, first of all, we have the perfect mix. We have older rich people and younger people with crazy ideas. And if you got those two together and the people funded the crazy ideas and we tried things and just what works and how does it fail and how do we adjust it. But also we can invite our community in and say, listen, you have all this red tape that we don't have. So you've got an idea, come test it out here. And then we'll see how it works. And then we'll roll it out from here so that we can avoid all of the regulations and the requirements that are hampering you from actually being able to do your work. So my mind is blown, and I'm so excited for the church and who the church could be.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
The church could be, yeah. Because we think that we're stuck.
We think we're stuck. We think we're boxed in. We think, and that's not to disregard tradition or the things the pillars that we stand on and all of that. But those are supposed to be launching points, right? Not things that imprison us. Jesus does not want us to be imprisoned. The Holy Spirit is crazy and wild and unbound. And we could really step into that space.
That's very Holy Spirit thinking, too, because the Spirit blows where it wants to.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And we can do all that, and we can still sit in the same pew every Sunday.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just get the important things taken
exactly.
care of.
No. Keep your pew, but think in much broader terms. So,
I guess, have you had a chance to come up with an example of how that might look for us? Or is this all just
this is really swirling in my head? I will say that one of the things that we've talked about doing is nurturing out of the Center of Vitality is nurturing creativity with churches more. So we're exploring those kind of options. And again, it's true to who our creator is. It's in creator to be creative, right? I really see this as an amazing opportunity, amazing moment in the life of the church that it could be. But a specific, concrete example, no. I don't have anything that I've sort of put flesh and bones on.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, none of that has to do with e-courses.
Right.
You went for e-courses, and you come back with this whole idea of, hey, we can be more agile than the U.S. Olympic team.
Right.
The U.S. Olympic gymnastics team,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. Who are so hampered by restrictions and requirements, right?
But they are agile, though.
Right, exactly. So their agility is required agility, right? Not necessarily creative agility.
And
so
I think that the place where we get stuck, though, is that it's in comfort.
Yes.
We get comfortable and we don't want to embrace that agility. And so have you had a chance to think about how to break down those comfort barriers at all?
I think, honestly, the reality of where church is just generally is breaking down our comfort barriers. I don't think I'm going to have to do much work on that because the reality is churches are shrinking, they're struggling, they're trying to find ways to be. Our world changes so rapidly these days that I think it's going to come down to we're either going to get comfortable with change or we won't be around to change. So it'll boil down to that. I don't necessarily. I mean, I can come into a church. I can tell you, here's the process of change, and I can actually tell you here's the slingshot back. When I used to be a study abroad advisor, and so I would train people in culture shock and the steps of culture shock and how to manage culture shock. So I could come in and do that for a church, for a group of people, and it's been helpful for the ones that I've been able to do that for. But just to inspire you to actually be interested in change, that's going to come one way or the other.
Most churches, they follow the leader. Honestly, they follow their pastoral staff. That's kind of the way it works.
The scary part is sometimes you're the leader.
Exactly. Well, that's where I'm going, because right now one of the things that stops me from being as creative as I could be is I'm just so worn out by the rest of ministry.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to look at a different structure of ministry altogether?
Yeah, I absolutely think we are. That was another interesting thing that came out of this conference was they started talking in terms of the number of people that will be freelance in their jobs and the number of people who will have two jobs at the same time. And it wasn't so much, they didn't talk in terms of economic necessity for that. They talked in terms of fulfillment, right? Like people needed a sort of a tie to the corporate world, but then they needed their creative outlet, right? And so they were both working for a corporation and in business for themselves at the same time, which seems insane, right? Because to be in business for yourself is sort of an all-consuming position. But it got me sort of thinking, there's all these predictions that we're going to move out of professionalized ministry, and you're going to be, either it's going to become ministry of the laity or it's going to become bivocational. Right? You will have two jobs. And I thought, well, actually, we're a little bit behind the curve on that. Because I think it's next year, they predict over 50% of the population will be freelance. And at least in some sense. So we're a little bit behind the curve. So I think we're going to need to rethink ministry in general. I also think the over-professionalization of ministry that we have done is to the great, deep detriment of the laity. People want a life of significance, and they can live out significance in church, really live into their passions if we would let them. But this idea that the paid people have to do everything has got to go. It's not biblical. It's not helpful. It's not who we ought to be.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you said, people have their job that they do for money and they need their creative outlet. There's no reason the church shouldn't be that creative outlet.
Exactly.
There's no reason the church shouldn't give them space to find that.
Exactly. Again, going back to the community laboratory, what if somebody had a vision for a new ministry? We ought to find ways to empower that.
Which takes us being willing to let go of control.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to have to talk to my therapist about that because I like control a lot.
Right.
It's also going to have to require us to take a hard look at our budgets and reallocate money to the laboratory.
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
That means you're getting a pay cut, Jeremy.
If we were able to do something like this, it would be really cool. I think maybe the most exciting part is it would get us as a church, away from being inwardly focused.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of things are happening in Methodism right now, but Bill's family's not Methodist, so we won't dive into them. But maybe the saddest part for me about all of it is it's all us looking inward and trying to deal with our own stuff. It's 100% inwardly focused, which gives us no space or energy to look out and to be the people we're called to be in the world.
Exactly.
To be a change agent. So.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what the Center for Vitality does, because I think that's something that's almost a mystery to our lay people in the conference.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Is it a mystery to you too?
No, it's not a mystery to me. Basically, what we're here as a resource to resource churches, right? We do a number of different things. We provide congregational coaches, which there's a lot of misconception about coaching. People think that you get a coach because you've done something wrong, but that's not the case. You get a coach because we actually see there's a tremendous amount of potential there. And coaches come in and just ask questions that get you to reflect on things in a new way. Coaches aren't there to mandate that you do one thing or the other. So that's one thing that we do. Kathy Hall, who's part of our team, works very hard at equipping the laity. She just took a group to Perkins School of Theology, School for the Laity, this past weekend. And we work really hard through sending folks to different conferences at giving them the equipment that they need and the passion, kind of igniting their passion. That's basically what we do. We're here in whatever ways to help you be more vital, to find your passion, to live into that reality, to figure out who you are and where you are and why you are. And we're there as a resource. This next year for me, my two main emphases for this next year, one is the online learning system, which I talked about, and we've got lots of cool stuff coming with that. But the other piece is to help churches put intentional discipleship systems in place, which I have honestly kicked against because I don't like the idea of discipleship being a system, but I don't like that in a big sense, right? Like, I don't want us to be this giant, here, we have this system and everybody fit into it, and then it seems like a factory. And I don't want discipleship factories. I really wanted a contextual piece added in. And I think I found a way to do the contextual piece. Actually, I think I heard the Holy Spirit tell me a way is more accurate. So I now have this frame called gospel discipleship that looks at the models of discipleship using Jesus' last words in each of the Gospels. And actually have an assessment that people and or churches can take to determine what kind of disciples they are. And once we understand what kind of disciples we are, then we can understand how we live into that discipleship. And that's very exciting. So there's Markan discipleship, which is gifts-based. There's Matthean discipleship, which is action-based. Lucan discipleship, which is relationship-based. And Johannine discipleship, which is mentor-based. And you can be a mix of those. I've had some people that have been a combination. But what is very exciting about that is we've for a long time talked about the mission field. Understand the mission field, and then you can understand how you need to be in service to them. And that is absolutely part of what you have to do to be vital in your community. The piece we missed was, who are the people going out into the mission field? And so this gives us a chance to reflect on who those people are. And understanding who those people are then gives you a path to be out in the mission field in a more authentic way. So I'm very excited about that reality that I have before me. But basically, that's the center is just here. If you've got something you're wondering about, I wonder if we could do X. Call the center. We may know either another congregation that's done it that we can put you in touch with, or we may have resources to help you do whatever you're thinking about doing.
Is this assessment another Happy Hippie Jesus Show exclusive?
It is.
Score! 1 episode.
So I want to know, because Jeremy's really into his pentagram number. So is that
pentagram?
Yeah, he does the pentagram thing where it tells you your number.
The Enneagram.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that thing. Is the assessment the same thing, kind of thing like that?
It's like that, yeah. Yes. But I've been it's been exciting. It's a 22 question multiple choice assessment, and I'm sort of testing it with some churches that I have a chance to work with one-on-one with it, and I've tested people that I've known, that I know about, to see if the assessment is valid, and it has actually been very helpful. I've been able to go to folks and say, look, you thrive in a mentor-based system, so you need to find a trusted leader that you can learn from in a one-on-one sort of space, versus, okay, you are a relational disciple. So you probably want to look at something like Fresh Expressions, where you go out into the community, start building a space of relationship with people, and start having Bible study at McDonald's or at the tattoo parlor or whatever, wherever. It really does give you a sense of, because I believe God puts a call and gifts us in particular ways. And I think God puts a call and gifts churches in particular ways. So if the whole church can understand, we're a Matthean church, right? We tend to be action-based. So we need to be out doing things. Then it gives them their sense of purpose and how they're supposed to live out their discipleship. So.
Yeah. If you're ready for an overwhelming amount of feedback, we can put a link in the show notes. You get flooded with people taking the assessment.
With all eight people taking it.
All 8 people. Well, I would say if you want to take the assessment, then they should send me an email, because I don't actually have it up online. I've been emailing folks out. But yeah, they can do that. And they can find that, my email on the Center for Vitality.
But seriously, let's take the Johannine disciple.
Yeah.
Would the assessment tell you if you're more of someone that is in need of a mentor or a mentor type disciple?
So it can tell you both. Right now, because this is so experimental, I'm sort of having to hand grade everybody's stuff and look at which questions they answered which way. I'm going to have to automate this, right? But for now, I'm looking at it. So let me give you an example of 2 people that showed up Johannine to show you. One person showed up as Johannine, and the particular questions that person showed up as Johannine showed that their discipleship grew if they went off by themselves. And spent sometimes directly with Jesus kind of thing. So that told me that person was probably an introvert, which turned out that was the case. Versus another person showed up heavily Johannine, and that showed up as the questions that they answered Johannine were things like, the church is failing if the leaders are doing bad things, right? It was centered around defining leaders. And so that person wants to be a mentor. They see leadership as an important gift to give to other people. So the assessment can kind of show both things. It's just right, like I said, right now it has to be hand graded to get that kind of detail.
So what we want everyone to do, we want thousands of people to email Michelle to take this so she can hand grade thousands.
Right.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So, Michelle, what's saving your soul right now?
My people. It's been a struggle the past few weeks, and I am grateful for my tribe of folks. There are people that are, we've sort of, and we should do this more often, but I have paid attention to the pastors that I know and love and have regularly reached out to them, and they have done the same for me. And I'm so grateful for that, because there have been dark days the past couple of weeks, and I'm thankful for that. I have actually formed new friendships in the past 3-4 weeks that I think will be lifelong friendships that came as a result of when everything was happening with General Conference. You sort of grabbed the people that were close by, not necessarily the ones that you were close to in heart, although you did that with technology, but you needed a tangible person. And so I grabbed somebody who was close by, and I'm grateful for that new friendship in my life. I'm also grateful for the people that knew me well enough that when I was texting and falling apart, they let me fall apart. And tried to rescue me in some cases, but also just let me fall apart. So I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful, and the other thing that's saving my soul is the Holy Spirit. Because in the midst of all of this, the Spirit has shown up in huge, huge transformative ways. I got that assessment. That assessment was handed to me by the Holy Spirit, dictated from the Holy Spirit, the week before General Conference. And I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like, this is terrible timing. And it turned out it's perfect timing, right? Because it's basically saying, look, no matter what's going on with the reality of the church, there's still disciples to be made, and there's still a life of significance to be lived for Jesus. So do that.
Jeremy, you skipped this question in our last one. What's saving your soul this week?
What's saving my soul this week? That hour in the morning when I first wake up. Just getting time, and I'm the only one, I guess, there by myself. So getting time to kind of read and journal and reflect, and that alone space has been good for me in ways that, as a naturally extroverted person, I wouldn't find otherwise. So that's it right now. Bill, you've been to Israel. Did you find anything new to save your soul?
Actually, that's what did it for me, honestly, this time. And it wasn't the fact that I went to the Holy Land. I just had to get away. I needed to leave for a little bit and not be a pastor. Never mind that I was a shepherd herding cats the entire time. My people there were great, but there were 53 of us, so I was herding a lot, but it was a different kind of space for me instead of having to preach and having to do hospital visits and excuse me, I'm going to reset. Getting to preach and getting to do hospital visits. But, carrying other people's needs becomes a heavy burden after a while. And it was just nice to put them down and worry more about who got on the bus instead of whose life's falling apart at the moment.
All right.
Does counting the right number of people on the bus seem a more solvable problem?
Yes, it does. I told everybody before we left, I said, look, this is basically a kindergarten field trip. We're going to count heads. We're going to... Right. It was great. So,
thanks, John. Do you want to tell us anything about how to contact you? We make Bill put all this in the show notes, so you don't have to spell your email address or anything.
Yeah.
But we've heard a little bit about what you're working on. Is there any other projects out there that you want to tell anyone about?
Those are my biggies.
Writing a book, are you?
Well, I think this gospel discipleship thing will turn into a book because it is such a needed piece in this conversation. But I am working on the adult Bible study. I'll be the student guide writer again for the adult Bible studies in winter of 2019. So that's all being finalized right now. I'm always writing books in my head, but as to whether I get them on paper or not is another thing altogether. But yeah, no, if you want to reach out to me, my email address will be in the notes, but it's Michelle.morris at arumc.org. And if you want to take the assessment, let me know. I love having conversation around it. I'm trying to test its validity. So
thanks for coming on and being with us today. And for all the exclusives, I feel like our viewers are going to be just blown away.
I know.
Yeah, we have listeners. We're an audio program, Jeremy.
I like to think they view us with their skulls.
Well, it's quite a sight for those of you who are viewing.
Yes. And with these exclusives, people are going to think we're actually important.
Yeah, so, right. There you go.
That's awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks again, Michelle.
Yeah, it's been great being with y'all.